Well, hello, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us today at the Hopenning for episode 24. We're very happy to welcome you here at the Hopenning, a place where hope is happening. And we are so grateful that we have this space to share with everybody where if you have the desire to have hope in your life and you open yourself to it, this is the place to be. My name is Marina. I am the co-host of the Hopenning. I am a certified rapid transformational therapy practitioner, and my co-host is Fran, and she is also a certified rapid transformational therapy practitioner. I am right now in Calgary, Alberta, and Fran is up in Grand Prairie in northern Alberta. High Prairie. I always get them wrong. High Prairie in northern Alberta. And so we are very happy to be here with you. My background is actually in music, and I've done a few things in music, and I still kind of keep my opera voice going from time to time, especially when I scream at my dog when she caught a chicken at a friend's house the other day. And then my friend Fran, she's a veteran teacher. She's been teaching for 33 years, elementary school age children. So today's subject is very much in line with Fran's passion for children. And because this is the month of May, and by the time you watch this, Mother's Day would have just passed in North America, actually, and a lot of countries in the world. It is a lot of focus this month on mothers and parenting and anything female. So we are handing it over to Fran now to introduce you to our very special guest.
So welcome, everyone. We have a special guest today. It's so exciting to welcome you, Ola. Ola Damaraz is the founder of ABC Parenting, and she has spent the last 20 years fascinated by what it means to be human and what makes us behave the way we do, and most recently by childhood trauma and development. She has been exploring psychology on her own and applying her learning to all relationships. In the last 7 years, all that knowledge was put to the test when she became a mother. Oh yeah. The challenges she faced led her to train under Dr. Shafali Sabari and obtain a certification as a conscious parenting coach. And we are so grateful that you're able to join us today, Ola, with your knowledge about conscious parenting. Conscious parenting came on my radar about a month ago, and I was fascinated by it. And so finding you and finding your background and your expertise in it it's another blessing for us. So welcome.
Thank you. Thank you very much. It is such an honor, and I feel so grateful and appreciative to be here with you both, with your background and your expertise as well. I'm very excited to be doing this, having this conversation about a topic that is very dear to my heart. I'm very passionate about conscious parenting, absolutely. And I'm happy to have a conversation about it and tell you a little bit more about conscious parenting.
Excellent. So we're going to start, before we ask you a few questions, with a video that you shared with us. So I'll share that right now.
Okay.
Make sure I put the sound on. Sometimes I completely forget.
So I wanted to ask, because I think one of the themes that's in your work is when something is occurring for the child and it's triggering something in us, that we need to look at ourselves rather than looking at the child. Why is that we need to continue to look at ourselves?
Well, I think all of life is an invitation to look within, all of life. And because we have not been trained to understand that life is a journey of constant inward movement, inward journeying, inward exploration, we get fooled to think that the outside is doing something that needs to be fixed or controlled. Now, sometimes the outside needs to be fixed or controlled. So if your house is, the roof is leaking, you do need to fix and control it. If, your child is failing in class, you do need to step in and support them. But the first step should be your internal exploration. Am I coming at this untriggered, not in a state of anxiety or lack? Am I coming at this with equanimity? And then I act. So with children, because children are so close to us that the distance, the detachment that we normally would have to create equanimity evaporates, right? With children, we have no equanimity because they are ours. And with that possession, the ego, the anxiety-based ego roars loudly. So children by nature are designed first to induce that deep sense of possessiveness within us, to create blindness within us because we so care, and that caring inimitably creates this sense of blindness, right? We can't see it. It's too hard to see. And then the third thing is that they are naturally very, chaotic, annoying, forgetful. They're built to dismantle any illusion of order or organization. They are brilliant creatures to crumble the so-called, I am self. I am the parent. I am in charge. I am in control. You will be my mirror image. They are designed to disintegrate that. And for me, that is the most exciting thing about children. But for everyone else, it's a burden. We want to fix it. And I'm teaching parents, no, you don't fix it before you first do the inner journeying, because if you just fix it and control, you've lost the point of this. The point is that they're here to show you how you need to grow up and where you are lacking in lack and how you need to grow in abundance. We're missing this, right? So my books are telling you, hey, don't miss this great big discovery. Like, what are you doing trying to control your kid before you look at yourself? You're missing it. So that's the big discovery that I want to share with people.
Mm-hmm. And it makes so much sense, because so many times when I look inward, I realize, oh, I don't actually need to fix that problem.
Yeah,
that's
there's
okay.
no problem.
Yeah.
How do we know if we know ourselves?
You
'Cause I know. I mean, I don't think my opinion is I don't think I'll ever know myself. So what do I do or what do people do to really get to know themselves?
You're right. We will never know ourselves because the knowing is not intellectual. So it's not like knowing what I'm going to say next, knowing what I'm going to feel next. We're not trying to control the knowing. Knowing the self is being inside oneself. It's the process of meditation where when you meditate enough, you know what I'm talking about, where you're just in yourself and the boundary is so clear and you're feeding yourself. You know yourself when you are able to feed yourself, when you're not entering lack, when you've worked on yourself so much that those lack-based belief systems get cut. They come, but the scissors, the shears are right there, chopping. You can see your inner terrain in the moment, and then you are able to then see the other person behind, versus the inner terrain is not being seen by you. It's totally overwhelming you. It's hijacked the situation. And then the most amazing thing about people who are unconscious, they think they're seeing their child, right? Like, I know, whoa, I cannot even see my kid because I have so much stuff right now in the middle. I'm totally faking seeing my kid right now. I'm not seeing her. But the unconscious ones, they're hijacked and they're like, oh, I see you. No, you don't see them. So it's a process of years of discipline and sitting with yourself, being in contemplation, being quiet, being still. You have to do the work, it's how do you have a, stunning biceps and a gorgeous six-pack and shoulders if you don't spend hours in the gym, right? That girl or that guy who we're envying has spent hours in the gym. So we have to spend hours in the meditative space.
Excellent.
Yes, so you saw Dr. Shefali Sabari there in action, talking about conscious parenting. And she's actually the one that coined this term, conscious parenting. She herself has been a clinical psychologist. She's worked in the field for over 20 some years. And, her journey is really interesting in that she was pretty confident going into motherhood. From a place of being a meditator for 20 or so years. She started meditating when she was in her early 20s, and then having all this experience of clinical psychology and seeing clients and working with clients, she was pretty confident in her ability as a mom until her daughter came into her life. And things didn't really work out the way that she thought they would work out. She had certain ideas of how things are going to go, how she's going to enjoy time on the beach with her 3-year-old. And she had a daughter who started pushing back and saying no to her. And this really opened her eyes up to what was actually happening and what it was bringing up for her. And this is how I actually happened to when I came across her and this concept of conscious parenting. And when I first picked up her book, The Conscious Parent, was exactly when I was having my own personal struggles with my daughter. So I have 2 kids, an older boy who's 10 right now, and a girl who is 8.5. And probably very similarly to many parents, I had a certain expectation and certain idea of how this whole journey is going to go. And it wasn't at all what I imagined. So that's how it started. I had with my son being the first, he was a very different child than my daughter was. And I remember hearing from various friends, parents, colleagues who would say that the kids they had were very different. And I often wondered, how is that possible? They're coming from the same environment. They have the same parents. Until the time that I had my 2 kids and realized how different personality-wise they actually are. And I don't know if you want me to share a little bit more about how exactly I got into this conscious parenting and what I went through with my daughter. But yes, go ahead, ask questions.
If you are open to it, that would be great to hear that.
Okay.
I think I've read about it. I think I read on your website about,
That's right.
It's super interesting.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So I believe it was, my daughter was about almost 2 years of age. And I've noticed that she would have a lot of emotion. She was displaying a lot of emotion when things didn't go a certain way, especially if they didn't go her way. And I remember very, very vividly this one specific day when she was going through, experiencing some deep feelings. And I wanted to, as a natural instinct, I wanted to hold her and comfort her. And she looked at me and basically said through her tears, she was very, very expressive already at the time, and her vocabulary was quite robust at that point. And she looked at me and she said, "I don't want you. I want my real mommy." And I didn't really know what to make of it. I just remember turning around to face my husband who was making supper, and tears were just coming down my face. There was something that she touched inside of me that at the time I didn't really understand. I didn't really know what it was about, but it struck a nerve. There was something there that was being slowly revealed to me. And this literally just, that was the beginning of this unraveling of a rebirth, is how I look at it now, because it was because of these challenges that I faced in our relationship that I was literally desperate for an answer. I was searching, I was looking, I was reading, I was, probably signing up for every course that I could possibly sign up for. I was talking to her preschool teachers, trying to really kind of find my bearings. Initially, I was taking things very personally, and recognized that I would ask myself questions of what am I doing wrong. It's so interesting how that's where my first, that's where my mind went to, is what am I doing wrong? And then eventually, slowly, step by step, with various sources of information and discussions even with parents who have grown children, who have very strong relationships with their kids, I started asking more questions. I started becoming more aware and becoming a little bit more observant of what was happening internally for me in this process. So even though, things looked and felt very chaotic on the outside in our external environment, because I didn't have a way of responding to her, I was reacting from my wounds still at that time. I, at the same time, was recognizing and paying attention to the energy inside of me, the narratives that would come up. And, in the time of, let's call it a storm, in those times of turbulence between her and I would notice these thoughts, I would notice these narratives, and I would just park them. I would just put them aside, and I would say to myself, I will get to it. I will deal with it and explore it at a later time. And I did. I took myself to the mirror more times than ever before. But I would go up and I would ask myself, what is this about? What does this bring up in me? What are the feelings that I'm feeling? What are the thoughts that I'm thinking in this situation? And that's really how this process started for me. And that's how I started becoming a lot more aware of the patterns of my childhood wounds that were driving me, that were not healed, and really that's, I feel extremely grateful now, seeing the relationship that I have with my daughter, which is complete opposite from where we were at the beginning. I feel extremely grateful for that gift. I feel like it was a blessing to have a child that was pushing my boundaries and challenging me to look at things internally. So, I have a mentor, his name is Peter Crone, and he has this fabulous quote that I remind myself of over and over again. And he says, life will present you with people and circumstances to reveal where you're not free. And I honestly believe that if we're willing to see our children as our teachers, as much as our students, that it's a great opportunity for us to evolve.
So, Ola, I've listened to a lot of Dr. Shefali already, and that was a really helpful video that we watched too. I watched one video where she actually got into specifics because there were audience questions, about, what if they're not doing good in school, and what if they, they come home and they throw their backpack on the floor and they leave, and what if they're picky eaters? And there was lots of these kinds of questions on it. And it was super interesting in how she answered them. Ola, you and I are both from Eastern European backgrounds. I mean, it's like chop, chop. You just listen to your parents. Kids are supposed to be seen and not heard, right? You just do what your parents say and no ifs, ands, or buts. So, I mean, I know I raised my daughters that way, and I regret it. I regret it now. They're in their 20s now, and I apologize to them often now that they're in their 20s, because really I just did what I was taught. And I think majority of us did that. But when I look at what Dr. Shefali is saying, it really is an eye-opener about parenting in general, and actually teaching too, right? Teaching children in general. So can you give us some specifics about like how you parent now that would be different than how you were parented, or maybe what you thought parenting was about?
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And that's so well said and very accurate. What you just mentioned is, uh, I know even for myself early on, I noticed that the only way I knew how to parent was the way that I was parented. That was my reference, right? And a lot of us, if we don't consciously choose to do things a different way, we will essentially automatically raise or parent from a place of what we know and from a place of how we were parented. And our parents, just like you're saying, Fran, our parents the best they could, right? With the information they had, with the knowledge they had, with what was available to them. So absolutely. I feel like at this point we do have a lot more resources, and there are various different styles of parenting out there that are all very intriguing and interesting, right? And so I know initially I would parent from that place, parent the way that I was parented, and very much like you said, a very Eastern European way. We don't speak back to our parents when they tell us to do something, we just go and do it. And it just did not feel right for me. It did not feel right in my heart when I would see my daughter or my son hurting in some way, and having this instinct of wanting to send them to the room, for instance, where, in some situations that could be appropriate. Some children perhaps respond to that in some way, where they're maybe sent to a room and the parent goes along and is there with them to be present and to hold space for them. It didn't work for my children, and it didn't feel right for me. It didn't feel good in my heart to do that. And so I would examine those ways, and I would try. It's really, I feel, a process of trial and error. And I would try different approaches. I would try different ways. So, even if I started initially of go to your room, eventually it was, my daughter who would say, no, I'm not going. What are you going to do about it? I'm not going to my room. And then I would have a conversation. I would sit with her, and it worked. It worked for her. But the one thing that I find sometimes is misunderstood about this type of approach is that parents or clients of mine would often ask, is this a very permissive type of parenting? Like, are we permitting kids to just do whatever they want? And it's not the case. It is actually coming from a very loving place, from a very kind place, respectful place, at the same time holding limits and boundaries, having clear boundaries with our children. So, like I can give you examples from my personal life where I would have conversations with my kids about a situation, if they're coming home from school and we have an agreement that yes, they will pick up their lunchbox and put it away, and they will put away their backpacks. And if they don't do it, we will remind them, we'll ask them to do it. But I also know that if that is my first response to them without taking the time to connect before I direct or I correct them, nothing is going to work. They're going to have a very different response or reaction to me in this situation versus when I've taken the time to really connect with them and ask them how they're feeling. Ask them, hey, who did you sit at lunch with today? Or ask them about their day and actually have a meaningful connection. When I remind them about their backpack, I don't get any pushback. They will happily go and, oh yes, thank you for reminding me, and put it away. And it doesn't happen very frequently anymore that I do have to remind them. But when I do, I have to first remind myself and ask myself, did I connect before I correct? So there are a number of ways, a number of, I don't like calling them strategies, but let's call them strategies that I've implemented with this kind of trial and error approach, because that's what it really is. It is a journey and every child is different. And I feel that as a parent, we really, if we take the time to really attune and get to know our kids and be present with them, we know intuitively what works. And so there are many, many different ways that we can approach the same situation. I know with clients that I work with, that's the process we go through. Sometimes certain strategies will work that I suggest, and other times they won't. Sometimes the parent will know right away as I'm suggesting something. They will say, you know what, this will not work for my daughter. Can we try something different? Or this will not work with my son. Can we try something different? But yeah, it's really a fun process. It takes commitment and it takes, devotion, but it's through trial and error that we get to really know who our kids are and how to approach them.
I love the whole concept also that I got from the video, that you first have to know who you are.
Yeah.
And I always had the approach, like, if I was not whole, how can I try to raise kids? And yeah, trust me, I look back today, and if I can have a do-over, there would be a lot of things I would do again. So one of the most interesting thing of what Fran and I are doing right now is to step outside our boundaries and our knowledge base into other modalities, which is why you are here today. But we also always try to see what are the things that bridge us. And so I actually should let Fran ask this question, because she worded it so perfectly before the time. So Fran, go ahead.
So I believe collaboration in this world is currency. Collaboration is currency. So Marina and I we do rapid transformational therapy. I mean, it's a lot of different modalities that we use to try to address issues within usually adults, sometimes children. And it all, stuff just boils down to childhood baggage from childhood. And so how does conscious parenting mesh with what we do? What would you, what can you tell our viewers about how RTT and parenting and what you do? There's like this, there's a mesh here.
Absolutely. Yes. And they're very, very closely tied together, because ultimately conscious parenting and this whole journey is, like Marina, you just said, is looking inward, looking at ourselves. And it's about raising the child within before we raise the child in front of us. And when I work with clients, this is what we ultimately focus on, because initially, my clients will come and ask or talk about issues that they're having with their kids, obviously. But this approach, they understand, is not about fixing their child. It's actually looking at and exploring within us, what is it that this situation or the challenge that they're facing brings up within them? What is the trigger? What is the upsetness here? And those are the things that we address. And I believe with RTT, that's exactly what you both do. And I know for me personally, I have right now, currently I'm working with an EFT, which is emotional freedom technique therapist. I have my own coach that I work with. And even though I'm on this journey and I am, dealing with day-to-day situations with my kids, I believe that I have a huge responsibility to look at what is it within me that I need to address. And that's where I would reach out to yourselves and do RTT or do EFT or do coaching. There are so many different modalities, but you know, I believe RTT is extremely helpful with that. And so, yes, I feel that the both disciplines are very, very closely linked together. So it's very complementary, and I encourage parents to go and do other type of, you know, try other type of modalities, because they can be very, very rapid and right and helpful in conjunction with other things. So as much as we try different approaches and different ways to address situations with our kids, we constantly are working on ourselves as well.
So in what we do, I find it extremely interesting. We have an exercise we do within our sessions where we call the upgrade of the child. And in our case, we take somebody that's hurting for whatever reason. It can be so many things. And we regress them. And a lot of times the origin was in their childhood. Absolutely. And then during the healing process, we upgrade that child. And I feel like what you are doing is you basically prevent people to have the need to ever come to us, which is phenomenal, because you're already upgrading that child on a conscious level, where we have to go back and work on the subconscious level.
Yeah, but you know, at the same time, I do find that a lot of the times when parents come in with their scenario, right, with something they're struggling with their child, it always goes back to their own childhood.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yes.
It always does. And the things that are brought up are the kids are like our mirrors, right? They're there to actually show us what it is that we have not looked at within ourselves. And that's an amazing opportunity. It's such a gift, really. And of course, it often goes to our childhood. Always, really, always goes back to our childhood. And I do find that, you know, when I ask the question, have you ever had that feeling before? Every time a parent will say, absolutely, 100%. So they know that it's not actually what's happening right now on the outside, you know, it's what is being stirred up within. And that is the focus. That is what is asking to be healed, to be held, to be connected with, right? And that's exactly what you do. So I believe. So it's beautiful. It's really beautiful.
You know, and I think about myself, and I'll be vulnerable a bit here. You know, I really pushed my kids to go to university. Like there was no ifs, ands, or buts. They were totally going to university. They're going to graduate from grade 12. They're off to university. But it wasn't about them. It was about me. It was about, because, you know, my beliefs were, you're not going to be happy in life unless you've got a stable job, a good income, that you've got a degree under your belt. That was my history. That was my thing. And yet I pushed that onto my daughters, whether they were ready for it or not. And I look back on it now, and I don't think it's a mistake, but it was my own stuff. And it was the same thing with the after school programs. It was like I was busy running my kids. I was running them to Ukrainian dancing and swimming and soccer and horseback riding and swimming lessons and all that stuff. Why? It was because it was my stuff. I wanted them to fit in. I wanted them to be able to do stuff. I wanted them to be able to not ever feel left out because they didn't know how to do it, because it was my stuff. That's how I felt growing up, because I didn't know how to do these things. So upon reflection, it was like, okay. And I love that about what you do, is because it takes the focus off the child and it puts it back on the parent. It's like, let's double think this. Let's look in the mirror. Let's look in the mirror now. Why is it the backpack left on the floor drives you crazy? Why is it that there's such a picky eater? Why? Why is it driving me crazy?
Absolutely. Yes. And I love the question. I often ask myself, what is the energy that I am bringing into this interaction right now in this moment? Is this about me, or is it about something that's actually happening in front of me? Right. And, you know, as parents, we do come from a place of, we want our children, you know, with the activities that you're describing, we want our kids to experience, we'll say that, we want our kids to experience all different, you know, activities, and we want to expose them to a number of things. So we're coming from a place of, perhaps, right? We could be coming from a place of, I really would like them to have an opportunity. But when we ask ourselves, what's really deeper underneath that? Did the child ask us to put them in ballet and horse riding and soccer, etc.? Or is it coming from a place of lack because I didn't have the opportunity to be exposed to these things? Or perhaps I wanted to be a ballerina, but I didn't have an opportunity, you know, to become one. Or yeah, it's really fascinating. And it's just, I find that it's what I find really amazing and beautiful about this whole process is that it inspires curiosity. And you know, if we are very, if we're compassionate with ourselves and there's no judgment, and we just are able to neutrally observe what is going on, we get real juicy insights into what actually, how we are wired. You know, I know I'm very aware of dialogues around me. And I do remember taking my daughter to a ballet class, and she actually wanted to, she asked to do it. And so we went to a class, and I would hear the parents when we were sitting in the, you know, essentially in the waiting area. And I would hear parents say how their child would rather sit in their pajamas at home and watch a movie than go to this class. And they were maybe, some of them were 3-4 years old at the time. And, you know, for me, it was just a question. I wish that I could even ask the parents at the time. And so, you know, whose idea is it to push them to come to the class? Is it coming from them, or is it coming from you? So just, you know, how can we be a bit more curious and ask ourselves where some of these ideas and the programming, where does it come from? And can we reprogram some of these beliefs that we have? You know, I know my daughter, for instance, does not like breakfast. And if she has breakfast, she doesn't want what we would call a traditional breakfast. So initially we would fight over, well, you could have yogurt or you can have an egg. Which one do you want? And she would look at me and say, I'd really like some noodles. And at first I would say, well, noodles are not breakfast food. And as soon as that would come out of my mouth, I would say, interesting. Who says they're not breakfast food, right? So then I'd ask myself, and I would sit with that and I would play with that in my own mind, and ask myself, okay, am I open to having noodles for her for breakfast? If that's what she would like, is that okay? And if not, why not? And at what cost? You know, am I would this preserve the relationship and still feed her? Or would I rather be, no, this is what you're eating, egg or yogurt, that's it, right? So it's pretty, it's fascinating. It's beautiful.
So I'm very curious to find out now, since you became a conscious parent and after that aha moment with your daughter, let's call it the turning point, when she said, I want my real mommy, how did things change for you?
Well, I will tell you that it was sort of my very first, I would say, glimpse, or very, very first very small opening to a number of awakenings that have come after that and continue to come. But there were probably another 3 or 4 years of very, very challenging times. Another sort of big pivotal moment for me was when I realized I wasn't accepting my daughter for who she was. And when I had that epiphany, I remember I was downtown Calgary, 11 o'clock at night, coming back from a circle with a number of, you know, like-minded people. And I I recently actually left my corporate job, and I realized that the reason I wasn't able to accept her for who she was is because I wasn't accepting myself in the moment of being a stay-at-home mom. I wasn't accepting myself for that. And so the extent to which I can accept her is the extent to which I'm accepting myself. So there were a number of these, epiphanies and awakenings. And that took time. It was still, I would say, a lot of pain and a lot of tough times where I had glimpses into, this awareness, this newfound awareness and the awakenings, but I still was doing things kind of more of a conventional way. But then slowly after time, slowly, the more work that I did with these questions that I'm describing, with asking myself, with basically, pushing around my own beliefs and deconstructing some of these beliefs, that one day, and I will never forget that, I was already in Dr. Shefali's program. It was the first month of this certification, when we just came back from a trip, and it was a very tough trip. I realized that I was quite unhappy being on this trip, and my daughter was really reflecting this back to me in a powerful way. She, I would have called her very disrespectful, and it was a very challenging relationship that we had. And I literally felt like I wanted to just crawl into a ball and never come out. It was very tough. I found myself crying. And I realized at that time that it was my ego that was really actually terrified of this new perspective that I was finding, this new way of seeing. And when I recognized that, and when I recognized that I was really the one that was hurting inside and that I really wanted to change, I remember the next morning she walked into the room, and it was like a veil had lifted, and I saw her for the first time. I saw this incredible, assertive, beautiful, innocent child that she is. And it's hard to describe, but it was almost like I was for the first time looking at her with new lens, and something fell away, something changed within me. And from that moment, and I think she was perhaps 5 or 6 years old at that point, that step by step, when things got challenging, I would go back to myself, back to the mirror, and really being a lot more compassionate with her and with myself, giving her as much space as she needed to process emotions. I became okay with the fact that we're here to experience the full spectrum of emotions. And if she is having a certain, emotion that in that moment, that's not going to last forever, it's temporary. So honestly, it was step by step. I feel like we're at a point now where I can recognize it in the moment when something comes up and it's mine, and I can actually say to her, babe, I'm going to take 2 minutes out for myself. I'm not centered, I'm not grounded right now, and I feel like I'm going to respond to you in a way that I want to respond. So can we just put this on pause? I'll be back. Mommy needs to take 2 minutes for herself. So I'm able to recognize it, but it's not all the time. I still have moments where I just, things happen. I didn't sleep well. I didn't, my meditation was cut short. The dog was sick, whatever happens. And I do find that sometimes I react. Now she calls me on it. She's able to say, Mommy, I don't think this is about me. I think you need to take some time. So we have this beautiful, very amazing, like symbiotic relationship where we both really dance together. I feel like we're walking hand in hand, and she's as much my guide as I am hers. And and we've been able to really transform this relationship, and it's a much deeper connection that I've ever had. with her, because I feel like I've been able to cultivate a deeper relationship with myself.
You know, as you speak, I think about we're raising a different generation of women, and no disrespect for my mom at all, because she worked hard, but we're raising a different generation of women who hopefully think of themselves differently and who will parent differently, right? And the second thought that I was having as you were speaking was the more self-compassionate we can be for ourselves, for our inner child, right? For our, I know that I behave like this because there's this little girl inside of me that's still sad about this or still hurting about this. The more self-compassion I can have for all those different little parts of me that are hurting or maybe that got triggered, the more compassion I can have for others. And it would reverberate, right? It's not just your daughter that you're having compassion for when you take the 2-minute time out. It would be maybe potentially your husband. Hey, babe, I just need some time for myself right now. I need to ground myself before I get back in this conversation. What advice would you give if the parenting styles of a dual parent family are different?
Mm-hmm.
So when you embraced conscious parenting, I don't know if your husband embraced it as well, but what advice would you give for, because different cultures have different ideas about how to parent, depending upon, the religion, the culture, all that background.
Yes, and that can be quite challenging sometimes, and it can be complex. The advice that I give to parents who have different styles, and I do come across that quite often, is just, again, come from a place of curiosity. Ask and understand where your wife or your husband is coming from. Understand that they were each, in a couple, each person has been raised in a different way. So the way that they're approaching things is coming from, most likely, from the way that they were parented. And see if you can come to a common ground on some things, most things, have conversations about it. And at the same time, honor the fact that there are different styles. I actually think that it's healthy for our kids to experience various styles of parenting, because they will also come across different teachers. They will come across different leadership styles. There are a variety of different approaches and styles of leadership or teaching. And so it's good for them to be able to be exposed to that as well. So I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing. But I think that the important part is between the couple, for the parents to communicate and have those conversations and understand where each one of them is coming from, and come to an agreement. And sometimes perhaps you don't come to an agreement, but can you, if you're not in agreement, you still got to pick what you're going to do. So this actually also, I feel like, strengthens potentially the relationship between the couple, right? Because these conversations come up, these type of discussions will need to happen when there is a different approach or different thought or style of parenting. Mm-hmm. So yeah, it's just be gentle with each other and just have a perspective of, it's okay to have different styles of parenting. I really believe it is. Yeah.
Amazing, Ola. That was absolutely fascinating. And before we wrap it up, I would love for you to tell our audience how they can reach you, how they can connect with you.
Okay. So the best way is to go to my website, which is abcparenting.ca. And ABC stands for, actually, acceptance is the bridge to connection. So ABC. But it's just one word, abcparenting.ca. And I do have I do have social media accounts. I haven't been super active over the last couple of years. I still, I'm still finding my way through that, but that would be the best way, is just to go to the website at this point.
Fantastic. And I will also put a link in the YouTube recording here so that people can connect with you. And thank you again for just such a beautiful message today and telling us more about what you do and what else is out there for people to create beautiful humans.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you, Ola.
So much. I really appreciate this.
Okay, so that's a wrap for us for today. So Fran, can you tell us who our guest is for next week?
So yeah, our guest next week is a Canadian filmmaker, and her name is Nicole Sarakar, and she's out of Victoria, BC. And the work that she's done with women in her filmmaking and just getting women together, a huge amount of women together to work collaboratively together to produce a product was super fascinating for me. So I found her, and I think that women in general need to do a little bit more of that collaboration, because I think too often maybe it's a stereotype, but when you get a lot of women together, there's sometimes a lot of backstabbing.
The claws comes out.
Yeah, claws come out. So the work that she's done with collaborating women to build an incredible product is, I think, it could be a form that we could all use, you know. And so I'm welcoming Nicole for next week. So I'm looking forward to that.
Fantastic. Thank you everybody again for being here. We are the Hopenning, a place where hope is happening. Really appreciate you sticking with us and watching this. And again, Ola, thank you so much for blessing us today.
Thank you.
See you next time.
Happy Mother's Day.
Happy Mother's Day.